Hello, welcome in to Let's Do This. Today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics. It's resilience. I have been waiting to record this podcast for weeks. And when you can't quite find the words for an experience, it's really emotional or it's monumental or it's really, really cool. That's how I felt for the last couple weeks. I facilitated a 2-day Chiefs and Council retreat for the Lil'wat Nation. So that's our local First Nations community. And if you've been here before, you know how meaningful and important this is. I realized fairly recently that I set some goals in my business last year based on a theory called 10x. So the 10x theory is if you decided right now to 10x your goals. So instead of saying, next year I'd like one more client. 10x would be next year I don't want 100 new clients. I really want to almost reinvent the way that I'm doing things completely because 10x maybe isn't seeing clients regularly. Maybe 10x is starting a podcast and creating a community and a, a retreat center. So the idea of 10x is that you are doing the thing that's really big and scary. So instead of incrementally just doing one thing that's a little bit better, going for your 10x. So last year, I wrote out some of my 10x goals, and one of them was to work intimately and intentionally with the local First Nations community. And again, this was a 10x goal. I hadn't made connections yet. I hadn't really established how I wanted to go about that or the best way. However, 6 short months later, I am not only intimately and intentionally working with the First Nations, I'm regularly working with them to help support the way that they meet each other, the way that they want to thoughtfully design business, reconciliation in the community, and all from my lens, which is learning and development, leadership development, facilitation, um, strategy, and all the amazingness. So this moment in time, I really want to share how monumental it really is and surprising. And I wasn't planning on talking about 10x today, but maybe this is a really good moment for you to think about what would your 10x be? Again, 10x is larger than life. And the whole theory is that 10x is actually easier than 2x, meaning if you actually go for the thing you really want, you let everything that's not that fall away and you get hyper focused. So, again, super meaningful moment in time. And one word that's kept coming back to me the last couple weeks, and it's reoccurring in my life. I don't know if you ever have these things where you it comes up once and it keeps coming. And the word for me has been resilience. What a beautiful word, resilience. And so today's episode is going to be all about raw resilience. What is it? How do you increase your resilience? Because here's a secret, yes, you can. And where does it come from? And really, what have I learned over time from working with tons of clients on this exact topic? And how can you really start to get better at resilience starting now? So here we go. A quick 20-minute or less episode on how are you going to increase your resilience right now. So my favorite first tidbit of information to share with you, if you don't know, this is from the American Psychological the American Psychological Association states, resilience is not a trait that people have or do not have. It involves behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed in anyone. So if you're listening right now and thinking, gosh, I'm not great at resilience, and I'm going to define resilience in just a minute, don't worry. It's actually something that you can control, change, adapt, and learn over time, honestly. So listening to this episode is your first step. So maybe let's back up a little bit and simply define what is resilience. It's a fancy word that can be thrown around in corporate settings, And what I know true in my heart is that resilience is one of the defining factors of humankind and how we really connect with each other and our previous experiences that are hard. The actual definition is resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, mental, emotional, or physical toughness, and or the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, like elasticity. And that's how I like to imagine it. It's like resilience is malleable, right? It's the ability to have an experience be hard and challenging and then be able to bounce back to a more regulated, neutral state. Resilience isn't ignoring what's hard and messy. In fact, the key to resilience is being with what's hard and what's messy. Let me give you an example. So Courtney in the past, let's say 5 years ago, before I started my journey on self-awareness and all of this really heavy lifting work, this was also previous to children, which brings out resilience. If I've got some parents listening, you know this. So I would have had a hard experience happen. Let's say something would ruffle my feathers. Let's use a really simple example to break it down. I'm driving and somebody cuts me off in their car. So Courtney in the past would have been really, my feathers would be ruffled. I'd be really frustrated. I'd feel like tension in my body and I'd be like, what the hell? This person is so inappropriate and rude. They're cutting me off. That's not right. And maybe I speed up and get really close to the car to like make them angry and put the pressure on. This is a real example. And now what I've recognized, the same situation, but with resilience, is somebody cuts me off, so an unwanted experience, but instead of the like, I get that natural reaction, the what the hell? But instead of the like response being, I'm gonna speed up my car and follow this person closely to piss them off, I'm actually gonna take a breath and be with how frustrating that is. So I'm not ignoring how frustrating that is. And I'm being with it and realizing that was frustrating because it was scary. And that was scary because I don't want to get in a car accident. And I don't want to get in a car accident because I have loved ones and family that I value. So actually, somebody cutting me off is about my value of family and really the fragility of life and wanting to protect that. And I take that moment to walk myself through that and say, okay, that's where this frustration is coming from. Cool. I know that cognitively. Let's now take a breath. Even right now, while you're listening, I want you to take a breath, like a full deep inhale and a really long exhale. And I let it process through. I don't push away the annoyance, the frustration. I be with it. And it's as simple as one breath. I wish more people knew that. If you want to move through emotions, if you don't want to carry things with you forever, it only takes a breath to acknowledge what you're doing. Maybe it takes you to ground your feet on the ground. Sometimes I hold a rock or a plant or something to ground the energy. If it's a really big thing, maybe I need to take a walk outside or shake it out. But that's it. Being with what is, that sets you up for resilience because you are again not pushing away what's hard, but moving through and then moving on. That's really what resilience is. Having something hard happen, unwanted, and being able to bounce back without being ruffled for a full day. My last quick story that I love to share about resilience and care and emotional carrying really is there was I forget where this story comes from, so I apologize if I butcher it. But there was two monks and they were walking by a river, and there was a woman who needed to cross the river. And in this sect of monks, they were not allowed to touch women. However, one of the monks says, "Hey, do you need help? Let me carry you across." So he carries her across the river and puts her down. The second monk, as they're walking away, says, "Hey, brother, you're not meant to do that. You're not meant to touch women." He said, "I know, brother. She needed help, and let's move on." And for hours, the second one kept bringing it up. "Hey, you carried her." And he stopped his brother and said, "Hey, brother, I put her down at the end of the river bank. You are still carrying her." That story always sits with me when I think about emotional carrying You can choose to carry it forever and ever, or you can take a moment to be with it and then allow yourself to move on and put it down. That's resilience, okay? It's plain and simple, that is what resilience is. Now, I'm talking about resilience today because, to be very honest with you, in the last 2 weeks, including the Chiefs and Council retreat, I've experienced a lot of challenging things. Facilitating and holding space for reconciliation and those who've been through true challenges is tough as a facilitator, as someone witnessing, and especially as the community that's experienced the pain. Um, the spiritual chief Gepchel, he's from the Lil'wat Nation. He led a TED Talk at the SLCC, and something he said really stuck with me. And he said, excuse me, let me just get it. He said, generational trauma lives in our bones, but we are working towards generational strength. This phrase cracked me open. Resilience isn't about bouncing back as much as it is about becoming something new. And as I witnessed many of the stories in that day, I heard stories about children caring for newborns because that's what they needed to do to support the community, about women supporting other women, about really concerns about health and safety and what's going on. In my own life, I've had friends recently go through some real hardship, real emotional stuff. And it makes me wonder if this moment in time is about resilience. What can we do to be with resilience in its raw form? And how can we be with all these hard things? Because sometimes it does not feel fair. My true and utter belief is that as humans, we all have the right to equal access of health and safety, care, kindness, love, and financial resources. And it makes me really frustrated to know the world is not set up in this way. So, what can we do about that? How can we still have influence in a world that feels like it's impossible to make any sort of headway? What I know is true for me and in the recent reality is being with and serving community. When I serve at my most local level, I get that sense of I can see the impact that I'm making and the support that I'm giving. And if I could give you a secret as someone who spends my business career and all my days listening, what we could all do better is listen. Listen to each other, fully hear each other. When we're doing the heavy work and thinking about resilience, it requires us to fully listen to others, ask follow-up questions, and listen to ourselves. Because as humans, I believe all we want is to be heard. So, my question for you right now is how can you really hear the people around you? Or how can you really hear your clients? What if it's not about me? What if it's about serving the collective? What would it look like if I was to serve this collective, serve the community, show up for other people, and show up for yourself, excuse me. Because I believe when we get out of line with that and we start focusing solely on ourselves, that's when we shut down and that's when we're not as capable of growing our resilience. So look around you. Who do you want to listen to? Who do you want to hear? What are the stories? I'm going to be honest, when I was in that space at the Chiefs and Council retreat, I just wanted to soak in those stories. The stories and the lessons and the wisdom. It brings tears to my eyes. How beautiful. How beautiful. Whew. Here they come, tears. The First Nations communities are what they believe in. Relationships first, standing up for each other, kindness, connection to the environment, reconciliation, reciprocity, equally giving and sharing with each other. These are foundational truths that are deep within me. I know, I know, are how I want to operate in this world. And to bear witness in in that day was incredible, was truly incredible. And I cannot say like words can't even express. That's why it's taken me so long to do a podcast about resilience and really this experience because it's so meaningful to me. And the minute I left, I said, more work like this, universe. This is who I am. This is what I want. This is why it was my 10x. Because it speaks to a part of me that's unconcerned about money, unconcerned about structures, and more concerned about connection, healing, and supporting what I can right now in this moment in time. So, my question for you is what would it look like if you were to do the same? To honor who you are, honor your truth, and to bounce back and focus on community. I'm going to give you some research that I find very interesting. According to a 2023 study by the Frontiers in Psychology, self-compassion, community support, and meaning making are the key predictors of long-term resilience. So let me say it again. Self-compassion, I care for myself. Community support, I have a connected community. And meaning making. So while I'm here talking and you're probably like, oh, Courtney's talking about fluffy stuff. She's getting all passionate. But this is how one of the key indicators of resilience is making meaning out of seemingly small things, like that walk you take, like looking at astrology, like finding the beautiful glimmers of sunlight in my son's hair. Like this meaning making is a key predictor of long-term resilience. And I have a statistic here that basically says that mental resilience can significantly reduce mortality risk. Individuals in the highest resilience quartile had a 53% lower risk of death over 12 years. So we're talking about life and death here. Like, come on, can you see it? Making meaning, self-compassion, I care about myself, and community support are one of the key indicators of our survival. And that's why I always bring it back to what Chief Gapchel said. He's the spiritual chief again of the Lil'wat Nation. We're working towards generational strength in a group of people that have experienced things that no human should on Earth. Generational strength. What would it look like if you were to start that generational strength for you and your family? I just want to say that when we're thinking about resilience, one thing that is connected to it is, as maybe obvious, is hardship. Do you need to, the question always comes in my mind, it's like, do you need to go through hardship to have or build resilience? And the answer is no. And also, hardship reveals it, right? So if you go through something challenging, and today's not the day, but I will at one point share one of my most challenging hardship stories that helped me really build resilience in myself and my others and others and help others. I'll give you a little sneak preview that it has to do with bringing children into this world. That experience was like a master class in resilience. Let me tell you, I had to be with the hard emotions. I had to sit through it. I had to ask for help. All the things that I would was resisting in the past. And I've come out the other side a completely different person. I was cracked open physically, metaphorically, spiritually, and yes, that was like everything was wiped clean. I didn't know what was up and what was down. And that was like the birthplace of resilience. I saw it as like a little sprout coming out of the earth. That's where it started for me. But it doesn't have to be that way for you to build it yourself. Resilience can grow through deep connection, loving boundaries with yourself and others, cultural rootedness, creative expression, and inner stillness. So, what I want to kind of end on today is when you think about resilience, you think about growing your capacity for resilience, it can really happen through creativity. For me, I actually started writing again. I started writing a little bit of poetry for funsies, just for me. Like, resilience doesn't always have this roar, sometimes it rhymes. But creativity is one of the most under-acknowledged tools for emotionally processing and recovery. So, according to a 2022 study, the Journal of Positive Psychology, engaging in creative practices like journaling and poetry significantly improves emotional resilience in high stress periods. So, boom. So, what's one small step that you can start doing is find a creative outlet for yourself, whether it's writing or journaling or singing or dancing. Creativity in life is what's going to help start to build your capacity for more resilience. I think about resilience in times of change. Change is not something that our brain likes. And in fact, there's this thing called the change curve. It was designed originally by Kubler-Ross to describe the process that we go through internally when it comes to change. So, this is how I think about it. Change is the outside, we can't control it. And transition is what happens within us emotionally. Now, this change curve, if you can imagine it, is like one kind of like a wave going down. So just like a big down and up swoop. When a change happens, what can happen internally is we can resist it, we can get angry, we can get annoyed. And then there's a point where we get to rock bottom, for lack of a better term. And then something shifts. We become curious, opened, engaged, and eventually accept the transition. When I think about resilience, I think about that curve. It's going to involve emotions, resistance, fear, anger, and there'll be a moment when you start to take a breath and accept. Accept this change, accept what's happening. And that could be 2 minutes, 5 minutes, or 10 years till you reach that point. That's okay. But you will go back up again and you will start to reach this point of resilience. If you can connect to it in this moment or each time along the curve, I would say do that with creativity. Go do something creative, go have fun. Okay, that's where I'm going to leave it for today. This was this episode of Raw Resilience. I want you to think about you're not weak because it's hard, you're strong because you're still here. And ultimately, what is your picture of resilience? What does that look like to you? Now go out in the world and be that resilient mother effer that you are. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.